Hello everyone. I know it's been a while since I left you a story, so I thought I'd hop on here and give you another one. Now today's story has nothing to do with complaining or bitching about what went on at work or woe is me, bullying, nothing, harassment. Today's story was inspired by today. It's like a dark, dreary, cloudy, kind of sad day, and it reminded me of a sad day at work. And I've had a few of them, but I'm going to talk about this one because it's very depressing. So, warning, it does talk about death, and if some of you can't handle that, then skip this video. Right? So this is my 25 to Life prison series. It's stories about what I went through working in a prison and 25 years plus, and that's why it's called 25 Years to Life. Some of the stories are about things I went through with the workplace. I'm going to share what I experienced with inmates and my own life experience while working in a prison. It's for entertainment purposes only. All the names have been changed to protect the guilty and the innocent. I'm going to leave in the description a picture of what the facility looked like that I worked at to give you an idea of how big it was as far as spread out. So to shed some light on the situation I'm going to discuss. So it was a regular day at work. Went in the morning, nothing out of the ordinary. Worked sick call, meaning inmates came in, complained about toenail fungus to a cold. And whatever it is, we discuss it, we assess it, and we give them some over-the-counter medication. If they need to see a doctor, we schedule a doctor appointment. Now, during our day-to-day working activities, if there's an emergency, it will be called out over the radio, medical emergency, medical emergency. And then it'll say where? Medical emergency in the gym, medical emergency in the yard, medical emergency in the library. It'll say where the emergency is. And then, as a medical person, I would have to grab my medical equipment and run out the door of the medical unit, because not everything is where I am. It's not like an emergency room in a hospital where people come to you. We go to them. And being that it's a large facility, 1 mile from end to end, so large that in the north of the facility it could be snowing, and in the south it could be sunny. That's how big it was. So we, as medical staff, would go to the emergency. Now, we'd hear the call over the radio. The officer would tell us, do you have a medical emergency? We'd grab our equipment, not knowing what we're going into, and we head out the front door. When we head out the front door, there's another officer waiting or shortly arriving within seconds in a van. We jump in this van with our equipment, and they take us to where the emergency is. Now, by New York State standards, you get 4 minutes to get there. By prison accreditation standards, you have 3 minutes to get there. Usually we're there in a minute to a minute and a half. Because the medical emergency is called out over the radio system, the gates open, the doors unlock, all the inmates are put on hold, so we have access to where we want to go and how fast we want to get there. All right, so picture all this in your mind, and we're working. We hear medical emergency in the program area. We're like, okay, the program area is big, but we don't care. We're going to get there, and when we get there, they'll direct us where to go. We never know whether it's an officer, an inmate, a civilian staff member, or even a visitor could be in the area. We don't know. We're just going there thinking it could be one of us. It could be a family member, okay? That's how we treat it. We don't think, oh, it's an inmate, let's take our time. No, we go blazing guns, blazing saddles, 100 miles an hour, figuratively, not literally, we get there. So we hear medical emergency program area. I stop what I'm doing. The officer in the medical unit secures my area, takes care of any inmates we're dealing with, puts them in a waiting area, locks the door. We run out the door. We walk briskly out the front door, get into the bus. The bus takes us down through the south, through the main gates, into the next area of the facility, which is kind of midway between north and south, heading towards the program area, which is pretty much center. We get to the program area. Now, there's already sergeants there, other correction officers, there's inmates, but they're held to the side. The fire and safety officer is there, and pretty much any officers in the area are already there. So we pull up, they're like, this way, this way. I don't ask staff, I don't ask inmate, I don't ask anything, they just show me where to go. And I have all my medical equipment to treat a stub toe to a heart attack. We go in. We turn the corner of this building, which is a rectangular, single-story building made out of brick, kind of an old-fashioned 50s vibe, mid-century modern. We go into this building. Now, looking at the faces of people, I can already tell it's not good. Because usually when you go to a medical emergency, people are talking, they're off to the side discussing things, but they're not solemn or sad. And I came into the unit and this feeling of overwhelming grief and sadness just hit me like a wave. Like, what is going on? Turn the corner, walk right into a room, and there she is. She was a staff member who had a lot of time at our facility. And very well liked, very respected. But in this moment, she was on the floor, not responsive. The deacon was there, and he kind of explained to me what was going on. An officer came in and explained to me going on. He said she was speaking with an inmate, and all of a sudden, she put her head down on the desk. She became unresponsive, and the inmate went and got an officer. Now, put a pin in this, okay? The inmate went and got an officer, who then called medical emergency. It's chilly today, so I have to wear a hat. I'm cold. So I'm assessing the situation. She's on the floor. No pulse. Now, she has already urinated herself, which is not a good sign, because when you lose all body function, which is part of your automatic nervous system that runs automatically without, like breathing, it's not a good sign. And she was starting to turn blue. So, not knowing what happened, you automatically assess airway. I opened her airway, and I could get a little bit of airway open. It was like when your body goes limp and you relax, everything relaxes. All your muscles, your vocal cords, everything just kind of collapses. Your tongue, everything. So I tried to get her airway open. I got it open a little. And started to do CPR. Now, because the situation was as it was, before I even got there, security and one of the sergeants had already called 911, because they knew everybody's trained to do CPR. And when you see an unresponsive person, you're automatically going to call 911. So paramedics were on their way. I was doing CPR, and it took EMS a little while to get there. When I mean little while, I mean minutes, not hours. Took them a little while to get there. So I'm assessing, doing CPR, doing airway. While I'm doing this, I'm noticing things. Her fingertips are turning blue. Her hands are starting to turn blue. So this is not a good sign. I alternate doing CPR with one of the officers because I'm exhausted. And I couldn't do it anymore. So they would jump in, do CPR compressions. I would jump in, do compressions. They would jump in. Meanwhile, we had someone bagging her the entire time. Bagging means using a bag valve mask over the person's face and compressing a bag to let air in. So while they're doing that, we're doing chest compressions vigorously and fast, to the point where we're dripping sweat from doing the compressions. EMS arrives, and meanwhile I'd gotten an AED implanted on her. Now an AED is an automatic defibrillator, and you put it on someone with some pads, and the defibrillator machine will tell you whether or not there is an irregular rhythm or no rhythm. Now a defibrillator only assesses if there is an irregular rhythm. If there is no rhythm, it's still going to tell you to do compressions, because it's not a person. It's not smart enough to understand that no rhythm means they're dead. It doesn't. You could put it on a table and it would tell you to do compressions. But it does know if there's a rhythm that's irregular. It can sense that, and that's when it's going to tell you to shock. Now, this machine was telling us to do compressions, no shock advised, which in my mind tells me there's no rhythm whatsoever. The heart has stopped beating. So we are now her heart. We are beating the blood through her system. Our compressions are getting the blood to circulate, get to the brain, come back down, circulate in the come, and just keep going. So you don't want to stop compressions. And I'm not going to give you what you should do, because there's so many methods out there. Some people still believe you should give rescue breathing and do compressions, and some people say don't do rescue breathing, because if you do compressions and you give rescue breaths, you're stopping compressions, the blood is settling to give rescue breaths, and then you have to restart to get the blood circulating again. So we were just doing compressions, bag valving at the same time. EMS arrives. They could not get their speculums in her either to get an open airway. We continued to do compressions while EMS talked to the emergency room as to what they wanted us to do. And this goes on for over 45 minutes. We are doing compressions. We are exhausted. EMS finally gets a doctor order to say, stop compressions, we're calling it. We're going to declare her dead. Which I think I was still in shock because it didn't register to me. Now, normally in a situation like this, they load them up and go off grounds to the medical examiner. But because an inmate was the last person on scene with this person, with this woman, they had to wait till state police and the medical examiner arrived, which could take time, before they removed the body or anything of that nature. Because I was one of the first to treat as a medical person, I had to stay there. Now this medical emergency started mid-morning. I wouldn't say 9, 10 in the morning. We did not leave that room until 7 o'clock at night, when the medical examiner said we could leave. State police had to interview the inmate, which was unfounded. They found he did no harm. He actually called for help, like he did, and that he had no hand in her collapsing. Now this part is going to be a little, I don't want to say gross, but it's difficult to discuss. a dead body goes in through some changes when it starts to decompose. And I always say we start decomposing from the day we're born. We're growing, but we're dying. But when you die and there's no life in you and your soul departs, some may believe that, some may not, there's actual decomposition immediately starting. Now, lividity started setting in. And what lividity means is wherever you lay, now if you're on your back, which she was, because we were doing CPR, blood will pull because of gravity to the farthest part. So your back will be covered in black and blue from the top to your toes. All of it will be covered in black and blue. Now, if she had lividity on the front of her body, that would be suspicious, because why would she have lividity on the front of her body but for, being on the front? She had bruising and lividity setting into her chest because she was actually dying while we were still doing CPR, but we didn't want to give up. So there was markings there, and markings nowhere else really. But I watched this poor woman go through dying, lividity, rigor mortis. And I sat there all day with this woman and did not leave her side until I was allowed to go home. And I say allowed because I work in a prison, and it was an investigation. Now, people don't realize things like this when you talk about prison. You see things on TV like jails and CSI and all that, or Datelines, but you don't think outside the box of what you're watching, and that there's people involved and they have a job to do, and within their job they experience certain things. Now, this was one of the hardest days. There's going to be more that I talk about. This is one of the hardest days I went through in prison. Excuse me. Because I did know her and she was a friend. So think about that when you hear about people going to prison or people working in prison, that they just don't watch inmates. There's so many layers to what they do when they work in a prison. And this was a bad day, and I will never forget it. And what's really sad about it is they offer the inmates grief counseling when someone dies, whether it's another inmate or a staff member. They will offer it to the inmates, but they don't offer it to staff. I did not have anybody to come and debrief me and to ask me how I was feeling. And the biggest way to heal and get over something, especially something traumatic, is to talk about it and release it and let it go and just give it away. I didn't have anybody to give it away to. I didn't have anybody to share the experience with. And all I wanted to do was talk about it and let someone know what I went through and that it was real. So this was a bad day. And there were a couple more that I went through that I'm going to talk about. But I just wanted to share this with you. So if you know someone that works in a prison or that went to prison, that they just don't go to work, punch a clock, do their 8, and then hit the gate and go home. There's so much more to it. And every day they wake up and go to work and go in that building or in that prison, they may not come out alive. They could be assaulted or murdered. So think about that. And working in the medical unit, every day you're working in an emergency room because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what you're going to do. You never know what's going to come through your doors or you're going to go through someone's door. You never know. So it's like working in an emergency room. All right, so I wanted to share this story because I wanted to give it away and share it and talk about it because I needed to. And there will be other stories that I need to talk about and that I will give away. So thanks for listening. If you want to keep hearing my stories, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Ding! And you'll be notified when I post another video, and hopefully it won't be too long in between. But life happens and we get busy. So I will try to share one sooner than later, and it'll be another story of a bad day in prison. And next to losing a coworker, this was probably one of the worst things I had to deal with. All right, so subscribe and don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and we'll be seeing you soon. Oh, and if you have a comment or question about anything, leave it down below and I will get back to you. Thanks. Take care. Be safe. Be well. Be kind to one another.